He's going to come around this very
What's the
early.
capital?
Here comes Dave right now.
We can talk about the ice cream thing a bit. What is that? Someone can't find out?
Okay. Next up, Julie Underwood. With an agenda bill which is unnumbered on community outreach and engagement plan regarding the city's financial health and stability. Welcome, Julie.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to present to you a proposal for your consideration that outlines a community outreach and engagement plan really centered on preserving Mercer Island's quality of life. So quality of life, I mean, that's really why you're where you're at. That's why I'm here. It's about our quality of life. And outside sources and authorities have actually rated Mercer Island very high on their quality of life. No surprise, right? No surprise. Business Insider rated Mercer Island in the top 50 of all American suburbs. You're 27 of communities that are one of the best communities to live in. Websites like Niche and Area Vibes, which help individuals find places to live, also rate your community very, very high. In fact, Niche website in the Washington area, you are in the top 10 as far as suburbs to live, places to raise a family. Area Vibes Livability gave you a score. It can score you from 1 to 184. You're number 6 in the entire state of Washington in livability. And let's not forget the interconnectedness we have with our schools. Mercer Island High School rated number 8 in the entire state of Washington by U.S. News and World Report. This is really what we're talking about when we're talking about funding. I know it's easy to talk about the money, but it's not about the money. It's really about our quality of life. Objectives in an engagement and outreach plan certainly is to start that dialogue with our community around what the long-term financial health and stability of the city is. And learn from citizens about their priorities. Should you decide to put this on the ballot and it fails, you will have to make some very tough decisions. You need to hear from your community about that. Inform the public about the services that are funded, how they're funded, and of course to seek input. In fact, in preparing for this, I've had a chance to meet with the blogger of My Mercer Island, Erin. And I asked her, I said, do you know about the city's financial condition, and are you aware of that, and that they're looking at potentially putting a measure on the ballot? And she's plugged in. She did not really know that the city was facing this financial challenge. And I was really surprised because she really knows a lot about your island. So she advises, yes, we need to go out there and we need to tell the community why. Why are we in this predicament? By the way, she said she thought the PTA could be supportive in this effort, so that was promising. The strategy I would recommend that you look at doing is convening a citizen advisory committee, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, execute a very comprehensive, ongoing communications plan to educate and inform, and of course, utilize robust and creative techniques for getting citizen input. Citizen Advisory Committee, they would help, and in fact, I'm recommending that it's the city manager that appoints the Citizen Advisory Committee, and start by seeking volunteers at the end of the year, and their role would be to help prioritize services. Again, should the measure fail, we need to understand what is important to the community, evaluate revenue options. So in other words, have we looked under every single rock? Are we missing any other revenue alternatives? And just explore that with them and then make a recommendation. I would want to hear from them about how is the city doing on communicating this? How can we improve on communicating this? And certainly I'd want them to advise me on, is this something we should take to the voters in November of 2017? I put on here potentially consider a council liaison. It really kind of comes down to what your past practice is, whether or not that's something you would want to do. I don't think it's necessary, but again, if that's something you want to do, I think it's really your call. I would welcome that as well. So, Robust Communications Plan. Let's hold some pop-up town hall meetings and some telephone town hall meetings. The technology out there is amazing to get input. For example, telephone town hall is a simple, all you need is a phone, and most everyone has one. You just phone in and you hear a presentation and you can actually ask questions. I really believe, I truly believe that government should be accessible, and I just think that is one way to maybe reach a population that maybe isn't so, driving at night might be difficult, or getting on the internet might be difficult. It's another way to reach the public. And pop-up town halls, I think it just creates this ability for us, having the ability for us to actually go where the people gather. It shouldn't always be happening at City Hall. I believe we should, maybe it's a shopping center, maybe it's here, maybe it's a church, maybe wherever. Let's go where people congregate. And there's also some amazing poll technology on the spot. Poll Everywhere is great. I don't know if you've used it. All you need is a smartphone. You ask a question. People are telling you on the spot. It's a drop down, or they can actually provide direct comments, and you can hear on the spot. People are engaging with you right there on the spot. Webinars. I know we use webinars for training, but why not to hold a meeting? Why not use a webinar to inform the community about what our financial challenges are? I just put that out there as another tool in the toolbox. And then, of course, you have to have community meetings. You actually have to be face-to-face. You have to actually see a person's eyes light up, or you have to see a person give you direct feedback, and you really need to be out there in the community. And this is where I would want to partner with the council in going to the chamber, to the Rotary, to the neighborhood associations, the organized neighborhood groups. And let's not forget, you have already a group of very active volunteers through your boards and commission. We really should be engaging with them, attending their meetings, letting them know what's going on. They should know, in fact, what's going on. And of course, partnering with our school board. Go attend our school board meeting, really making sure that they're clued in, they're on board, they're supportive as well. And then, obviously, your website's great. There's a ton of information on the website, and I know that's really being responsive to your community. I think we just continue to do that, the e-newsletter. Can't forget social media. It's a necessary evil, I understand, but I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a great way for us to put information out to our community. And of course, you can poll on Nextdoor, Twitter, Facebook, again, another way for us to get some more input back. And you can't forget Mercer Island Reporter. Continue having those conversations. I understand your reporter is great, balanced. That's the sense I get from reading some articles there too. And then print. Why not do a postcard to every resident and business saying, these are the ways you can learn more about this. These are the ways you can tell us what you think. And then, of course, if you should decide to put this on the ballot, really advise you to make sure we put a mailer out again. An informed voter, that's what we want. We want an informed voter. Timeline. Actually, it says December, but now. Start now. Start communicating this now. In fact, it was something I did in Shoreline. Once, actually when the recession hit back in 2008, I mean, we did a print newsletter. It was great. We did 10 issues. We didn't have a local newspaper, so we really needed, and from day one, the city did the newsletter. Went to every home, every business, and since the recession, we planted the seed. Oh my goodness, this is what we're facing, but because the council has been conservative and there are reserves, we think we can weather it, we think we're fine. And remember, we started telling you we were facing financial problems in 2005. So I'm really proud of the fact that Shoreline really had this value for planning ahead. So, and then obviously we would start at the end of this year, and then hopefully everything would wrap up in November of 2017. You have an important role in this process. You will decide whether or not this actually goes to the voters. So I would recommend that the Citizen Advisory Committee, they would start their work in February, wrap up in May. I would come to you with their recommendation, my recommendation. You have to adopt an ordinance. You actually have to appoint a pro-con committee. You have to adopt the language, the title ballot. You have very significant work to do should you do this, and in very short order. So King County Elections has to have all this material by August. At that point, really it becomes, hopefully, a citizen-driven, community-driven campaign. And of course, as you know, no public resources, no public funds, no public time, nothing. At that point, we are just data. We're giving the community data and information, and it's really the citizen that will drive the campaign. And then the election. So again, this isn't about the money. This is about preserving the quality of life that you all really have played a part in making Mercer Island. The school board has been making, every volunteer group out there, every member of this community has a stake in our quality of life here. And that's what it's about. That for me, that's why I get up every day. It's to me, I get to play a very important part and role in making the quality of life Mercer Island continue to be exceptional. So with that, I recommend that you discuss this and approve the community outreach and engagement plan. That.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, so questions.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. There's a couple places in your agenda where you specifically call out for the city manager to do this, for instance, to select members of the Citizen Advisory Committee. And I'm just wondering why that role for the city manager versus the city council? And then also you made a comment regarding, you expressed some hesitation, and to me that's not correct, but you question whether or not there should be liaisons, and you said only if you think it's worthwhile or historical practice. And I'm just wondering, in your experience, is that something bad, or why did you say that? And anyway.
No, I was hoping someone would ask this question because I'm intentionally saying that the committee will provide an advisory recommendation to the city manager. I think it's my hope that really we try to have a committee that's apolitical and really a committee that is coming together because they are concerned about our levels of service. And so maybe it's also a committee with some citizens that have some expertise, some background in finances, and so that was my hope, is to try to kind of, and also maybe try to seek frankly, some community members that maybe haven't been involved in the past as well. It was my hope to really try to make this more than just politics. It really, to me, should be a broader issue of really operating and providing services. Council liaison, I've worked with citizen advisory committees where we've had liaisons on the committee, and council liaisons that weren't on, not having that. There's pros and cons to both. And sometimes I think some citizens may not be as frank and open if there's an elected official there. I've been told that. So, and I think sometimes it is better if the manager can kind of summarize where the themes are, where the energy is, and then report that back out to the council. But sometimes it's been helpful to have actually, council members participate on a committee, because what's really cool about that, what's really helpful about that is they can provide for citizens a context that they don't have. So it just really kind of depends really on the situation. I think on this situation, one, I wanted it, you don't have a lot of time. You just don't. And I was really looking for a condensed period as well. Hopefully I answered.
Yeah.
And
I was looking at the information that you gave us, including that the shoreline mail that must have gone out, which I thought was very well written. I was curious, you went to the ballot in November 2010, and I looked at the chart on projected annual budget cap, and I noticed that you got a projected deficit in 2011 of almost $2 million, but that includes this $1.2 million repayment to revenue stabilization, which I interpret to mean that you were running a deficit in 2010 that you had to dip into your reserve funds. So, and I asked that just, so I'm trying to set the context, what you had in Shoreline.
Yeah.
In 2010, it looked like you were already running a deficit in 2010 when you went into this, or am I wrong on that?
I'm glad you brought up the revenue stabilization fund. So remember, we didn't go out to voters until 2010. We started having conversations with our community members in 2005. We were projecting, remember the state requires you to provide a 6-year projection. So we were seeing years down the road, we were going to have the lines crossed. So in advance of that, the council, with the recommendation of the city manager, created a revenue stabilization fund. What that is basically those revenues during a recession that are, that generally dip, like sales tax, generally. So we tried to take some of those revenues and create a fund so that when the recession hit, so when the recession hit in 2008, 2009, even through 2010, we were fine. We had the fund. We were able to really not do layoffs, not do anything major because we planned ahead. We had a savings account, more or less.
So you basically, what I'm getting is that.
But with the intention, it was council policy that you take money out, you put money back in, right? So you wanted to repay the fund over time again, because we had to dip 1.5 million, right? During the recession when it first started, and so that's what you were seeing is we had to pay it back.
And the difference in our situation is we're still running surpluses at this point.
You have one-time surpluses. They're one-time revenues. They're not the same as sustained revenue. So I know, you're right. You're bringing up a great point. Might be difficult for us to communicate that with the public. We would have to work on how to explain that.
Chuck?
Well, just then from I think two-part question, quick. One is just on, I love the messaging notion that it's about quality of life,
Yes.
not about money and finances. And is there a meaningful difference between psychologically or marketing wise between preserving, which you wrote, and enhancing, making better? And then the other half question was on this advisory committee. How do you pick them? We've had an advised stakeholder groups, and sometimes they get viewed as being sort of skewed and not representative and stuff like that.
Right, and this is where and hopefully you saw that I would need to consult with council. You are obviously really plugged into your community. You know community members individually. I want to consult with, and I've done this in the past too with past advisory committees where I've said, what do you think of this list? Is there someone missing? It's really important to make sure we have all voices, I think, at the table, even opponents. We really need to have opponents at the table as well. So I would really count on you to inform me, educate me. I would count on leadership team members. But I also want to try to see some new faces, and we had success with that in the city of Shoreline. We actually got people that never saw them before, but they said, well, this is an important issue to me. And the key too was it was ad hoc. It wasn't going to go on forever. It had a definite end in mind. It definitely had timeline, and then it would sunset. So I think that appeals to a certain group of kind of citizen, you know. And so I think there's a way to do it so that the committee is pretty well represented.
No notion between preserve and enhance, and especially when you're running a, you know, a surplus that you know maybe you have to say.
Yeah.
What's more motivating, is it a difference in how people are motivated to vote?
I think there is, and I think, so when I was, and so before I got into local government, I worked in public affairs and communications, so I have a real appreciation for communications. We worked at, you know, I worked in Washington DC where we had to lobby congressional members, and so I have a real appreciation for communications. So as we were thinking in Shoreline, how to communicate this to the public, how do we get this out? I was struggling with it. I myself was saying, okay, so you're telling me we're going out to the community and saying, give us more money, but they don't get any more for it? They're not getting more for those dollars? I was just like, how are we, what's the story there? Why are we going back to what Aaron even said? Well, why? Why are you in this? It really comes down to the 1% limitation. 1% and inflation 3%. Well, you know over time, at some point, you're not going to have enough just to maintain your basic services, the services you currently provide. So that really helped us shape our messaging. Also, I think, frankly, as humans, we're more motivated by loss, right, than we are by possibilities of new and greater things. So I think, you know, the possibility of losing our quality of life is a greater motivator, I believe. Yeah.
Other questions on this?
So I'll go back to playing one of my greatest hits. Communicating with the entirety of the community. Sorry, I'm just going to read my questions. I don't know it. Communicating with the entirety of a community, it's always a challenge. Of how do you know that the level of feedback that you're getting is representative of a big enough subsegment that you can make informed decisions?
Well, as you know, you have a group of citizens that are influence you. They come to you and they tell you things often over and over again. That happens everywhere, and so I try to balance that with doing citizen satisfaction surveys. So on the one hand, you might be hearing, oh, the city's screwing up this, the city's screwing up that. But you really need to do a broader survey to kind of get a better sense of, okay, it's not as bad as you think it is. Now, granted, you don't do that frequently, so, but I think it helps in just providing some context, some balance, some perspective. That the sky isn't falling and the world is not going to end because you're doing X, Y, and Z. So it helps, I think. Also just, so I'll tell you one story where I'm doing my city job, and I also have my mom hat on, and I'm at a school event, and I bring up a city issue thinking, okay, this person's obviously, you know, on next door, they're hearing all the feedback, and they're thinking the same thing, all this, and they're just clueless, okay? I mean, so it just helps me recognize there are citizens that are really plugged in, and there are some that just, you're doing great. You're doing a great job. And, you know, there isn't as much of that negativity as you might think exists. That there are segments of your population that think you're doing great. So I think it's important. So by that I mean, sometimes you really need to go and just talk to other people that you don't normally see at a council meeting to get some balance.
So just following up on that question, how often would you recommend going out to the community and doing a satisfaction survey? Because we do it every 2 years.
Yeah, every 2 years. I looked at your satisfaction survey. I might recommend doing it a little differently. Like I would spend a little time asking about satisfaction levels and that sort of thing, as well as because I see you're using your survey to kind of get the pulse on certain hot button issues. That's great too, but at the end of the day, you're running a city. You know, I want to know operationally, how are we doing with
Do you think every 2 years is enough, or would you do it more?
Since it's been my experience, it's pretty darn good. You don't get a deviation difference, I don't think, in that time frame. I mean, you do see, we also asked, what are your priorities as a community? You do see that change over time. And you'll see, you know, maybe 1 year it's traffic and congestion, right? And the next year it's planning for growth. And so it can vary. Yeah, 2 years seems to be pretty good. And plus, they're expensive.
Super fast follow-up coming up.
Do you think it should be the city manager's purview to do the survey, and create the survey, or do you think that's a council job?
In my experience, the manager led with that because again, we wanted to get a range of input around the services we provided, public safety, public works, parks maintenance. We wanted to know a ton of things. So, and then I would see in that case we would bring it to the council to review and are we hitting the right things? But generally speaking, we wanted to know how we're doing. And I'm proud to say when we, as recent as when I was manager there, I mean, we got satisfaction ratings where 77% of our residents trusted us with their taxpayer money, 77%. So I do feel like we did really a great job at informing the community and always asking for their input.
Thanks. Okay, we're going to go around the table with other questions. Mike, you're related to the presentation. Mike.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. I'm sorry you had to go after lunch.
I know. I
slot there. So appreciate the extra energy that's coming through. So for us, again, as Dave says, greatest gets questions. You guys have heard it before. Our recent school district data is actually showing that there is a substantial change in the demographic on the island. So they actually did some research. Kindergarten first graders coming in, 11 to 12th graders. There's a 10-point difference in terms of people basically white, Caucasian, being bi or multiracial, which is really, really interesting. And since we rely more significantly on the census data, which is once every 10 years, we're not necessarily picking up on that as facts of what's happening. So how do you see the city responding to this? Do you have some examples where you've had to address this or similar types of issues in your other experiences?
Yeah, we worked in Shoreline, worked obviously really closely with the school district, and in that case, they went through a period of contracting, so a period, and so we often worked with them, for example, they wanted to, it was very smart for them to hold on to school sites because demographics can change, and so we worked out a deal where the city would create a park on that school site and maintain that school site, but again, in perpetuity it belonged to the school district. So we worked with them pretty closely in some of those planning issues of how we're going to get ahead of things. But generally speaking, I think we're, I think it's hard to try to find these planning opportunities, but in the city of Shoreline, we held some joint board and council meetings that I think helped to get ahead of these things. I know when I became manager, I held actually an education summit where we had our superintendent attend, and we had a Shoreline Community College, we had our college president attend and educate us about what they were seeing and some of these changes in their youth population. And I think some of this just starts with just having those conversations and hoping that really we start thinking about it in our planning. We try to have it obviously reflect in our PROS plan, Parks, Recreation Open Space plan as well. So we really tried to work with them on that as well. They needed to be part of that, because obviously a lot of, you need passive spaces, but you need some, active spaces, and how could that, how could we make sure we partnered with them and count their school sites as part of those open spaces as well. And so I think, tried to do that. It's an area we could do better.
I'm thinking of, on the theme that is the partnership with the school district, the other part is, the data that they've provided the city indirectly is that our demographics, the population of Manhattan is changing, becoming more racially diverse, culturally diverse than it has been in the past. And so what might we do as a city to amend or reflect some of those changes in the services that we offer?
Well, like the city I live in now, I mean, we have it's a home apple, so we have a lot of, in fact, I think it's 85% of the city's population shifted from 30 years ago being primarily Caucasian to now 80%, 85% Asian, Indian, and Chinese. So for example, that community has a Diwali festival. So it kind of, I think we would want to really understand, is there a core cultural group that's forming in town that we want to honor and respect? So you could do some really fun things like that and honor those cultures. It just, you're seeing that start to happen. I think, to me, what you're bringing up is really significant, is that trend is probably going to continue. It's what I think. And it's great you're bringing that up. And I think having a culturally diverse and rich community is a great thing. So, thanks.
One of the major issues that we face, of course, is transportation issues, and in particular right now, and likely upcoming. And so, what makes you the best candidate to be city manager to lead us through this? I mean, what skill sets do you have that can help the city council, the community, basically move forward on this issue?
Well, I think one of the things I bring is the ability to help people kind of manage change, and some of this, as you know, and you are doing everything you can. I applaud you for doing everything you can to try to influence that process as much as you can. And because, as you know, some of this is maybe even beyond your control. And so being able to help the community understand that, I think, is a strength I bring. So communication strength, being able to communicate that. Some of this is, really also about really, it is about kind of keeping an optimism and some sense of enthusiasm that I know this is going to be tough. Like, I think about what you're going to be experiencing during the light rail construction. You're going to hate it. It's going to be awful. We should just, it's going to be terrible, and we should just come clean. It's going to be bad. But it's going to be over at some point. We will get through it, and once we get past it, this community will be better for it. So I think I would bring that. I think negotiating, again, I think you're doing everything you can to negotiate a favorable outcome. I think on the negotiation end, I tend to be more of a collaborator and listener, and I try to find some common interests and common ground. You have to know when to kind of use a stick and when to not. And so my preferred style is to try to find that common ground, if possible. Because again, I'm not sure how much leverage we have. So it's just, you have to kind of consider that. So sometimes it's easier to negotiate with someone that's more collaborative in style.
So we have, personally, big fan of collaboration, but we have situations where citizen side, council side,
Yeah, well, give you one example. The Point Wells development, which is a development outside of the city of Shoreline in unincorporated Snohomish County, but the only way to access Point Wells, and it's an old refinery. The only way to access it, you've got to go through Shoreline. And currently, right now, that is the only way, and of course, it obviously severely impacts our community. So when I became manager, I was saddled with this big problem, and how do we handle this? And of course, I have community members coming up to us and council saying we should litigate. We brought in outside counsel to advise us, of course, similar to what you're doing. We want a second opinion, third opinion. What could we do here? And it came down to, I really had to advise the council to negotiate something with the developer. You can imagine, our community members didn't know you needed to fight this thing. You needed to fight and win. But all of our legal analysis showed us we were going to lose that fight. So what could we do to work with the developer to mitigate this as much as possible? And so we were taking the collaborative, negotiative approach. So you can imagine, I have community members so angry and so upset with us. And because I have relationships in the community, I called one of my Rotarian friends, a good friend, and said, would you mind hosting this development went through his community, of course, and I said, would you mind just hosting some citizens? Can we go to your living room and just talk about this? And just, I need to listen to them, I need to hear them. So I would take that approach and listen to them, and I'd also explain to them as much as I could where we were stuck. And problems we saw, why this was going to be a big issue for the city, and that we didn't think litigating was going to put the city on top. So I would do that kind of approach. Also, I would invite, because of course there was an activist group that came together, I'd invite them in regularly. We'd have meetings, and I'd update them on where we were with things. And there were a couple of things where this group of citizens went behind the city's back and tried to negotiate with Woodway, a small town that also, wanted to fight the development as well. So it was tough. It was a tough thing. They did litigate that all the way to the Supreme Court. And like we advised the council, they lost. The developer won. So, they're still, I'm sure, negotiating this whole outcome, but it's tough because what I find so challenging about that is I'm with the citizen. I don't want this to impact them. I wish it would go away, but on the other hand, I want the site cleaned up. It is a dirty site. It should be clean for future generations. But in order to get that, this development of huge, massive development, okay, 2,000 units or more, it was huge, was going to severely impact my community. So I was with them, but at the same time, I had to be, or at least they had to view it as I was against them, but I wasn't. I just had to think about the broader picture and the broader implications. Thankfully, I was able to work with our council, because at the end of the day, you all had to make that tough decision to support the recommendation that I gave. The council had to support it, and they did. And they took some flack for it. But as you can see now, that outcome resulted, again, the citizens that came together to litigate it, they lost. So the city really, and the community is better off, because the city also had this other path of trying to negotiate something.
You have 2 minutes. I wish you'd love to say that. had success with economic development. And that's something that we've really struggled with over a long period of time. How would you approach it here?
No, I'm sorry. We started 5 minutes late. You have 8 minutes, or 7 minutes.
See,
You started 5 minutes
Give
late.
Dan some of those minutes.
Oh,
what do you want me to do?
carry on. I'm just saying, we're starting at 5 after. We'll carry on to 5 minutes
That's a
late.
good question. Let's go.
Go. Same
Economic
question.
development.
Economic development, what would you hear?
Well, obviously you have a plan and and a vision. I would work to implement that vision. So I think you're soon, well, you have a town center vision and plan. So that's the plan. That's what would be implemented. So, and there might be challenges to it and there might not be. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think economic development has to match what the vision for the community is. In Shoreline, that community wanted more amenities and more economic development, really more density in the right places. They wanted density. And they really looked at it as, well, let's create that density in these already commercial areas like the Aurora Corridor, and they took that philosophy of, well, if we do that, then that really preserves the single-family residence. And so we never do anything in the single-family area because we're just focused in this area that's designed for it. So right when I was leaving Shoreline, we were kicking off the sub-area planning for the 2 light rail stations that are coming to Shoreline. Because naturally, those are single-family areas. But the council, again, wanted to capitalize environmentally. They saw it as the right thing to do, is to try to create some potential for transit-oriented development around those stations. So they embarked on a sub-area. In fact, Debbie Terry, of course, my colleague, and Shoreline, Monday night, the council is adopting the 2nd light rail sub-area station plan to, again, get ahead of and create some zoning that might attract and incentivize some development ahead of light rail coming. So they're being very progressive and very out there, but it comes at a cost. They will have opposition.
Thanks.
So, quick question. I was intrigued by some of the stuff you were saying about survey results. So I assume that in your experience at Shoreline and in Daly City, you have metrics that you're using, internal metrics that you're using. So we do too at Mercer Island, and once a year our finance director does a presentation to us of these metrics, and then we get, binder full of charts and stuff. So how did you do that at Shoreline and Daly City? How did you present that to the council? What a city manager or assistant city manager, what do you do with that information?
And I'll be honest, my philosophy around performance measures and indicators has changed over time. When way back in the day, almost 20 years ago in Rockville, Maryland, I helped institute a performance measurement program in the city for the very first time. It was very vogue in government, as you can imagine, and so all local governments were getting on the bandwagon, and so we did. And we created over 1,000 indicators. I mean, it was crazy. And then, of course, over time, we try to scale that back. What I noticed over the years is the council and community doesn't really look at those indicators. So when I became manager, we shifted and created, you all would obviously guide by developing the goals, and then with the goals, I created indicators tied to those goals. And that's really what you began to really look at, and we started using that to measure our performance and progress. So to me, it comes down to, are you using that data to make decisions? So really getting at the other issue I have with, again, starting this years ago, is the more the data can be automated, the better. If I have to have staff actually go and get the data, mine the data, pull it together, again, you you know, you have to kind of question, are we really using our time wisely, and are there ways to automate it? So I really want to get into that a little bit more, because again, I don't really see the community and the council dig into that. That being said, we as staff use that data around our efficiencies and how we compare, because ultimately that's what you're going to say. You're going to say to me, well, how do we compare to Bellevue? How do we compare to Issaquah? So I want to know of those things, how do we compare and benchmark around against those other jurisdictions? So I guess I'm saying that you can go too far, but there is a, you know, Goldilocks sweet spot. We just have, it's a reiterative process, and we have to keep working at it.
We're out of time.
You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I asked questions.
All right, much
Thank you.
appreciated. Yeah, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and jump into any executive session here again. Yeah.
Now that we've been planning in my own.
So, at 1:50, we're gonna go into executive session for 30 minutes pursuant to the RCW relevance to this.
That's not exactly. I need more tea.